Well, good morning, everybody. I hope you've had a wonderful weekend. I hope your Thanksgiving was great, and as Christmas approaches, I pray that God will continue to work in and through you, bringing your family together. Last time I was here by myself. Today, I have my lovely wife, Jennifer, over there. Next weekend, we'll be married 32 years, so we're excited about that. But this morning, as we get together, I want you to know that light and darkness do not coexist together. Whether it's a match, whether it's a flashlight, or whether it's a bonfire or the high beam on a car, light always pushes darkness back. They are in conflict with one another. Now, God created it in such a way that the sun and the moon work together to bring light to our world. But the moon itself reflects the light the same way you and I reflect the light of Jesus. But I want you to understand there's rivalry and conflict in everything. We got any Oklahoma fans out here? I didn't think so. Got one. You are a brave man, especially this year, right? No, but you know, football and sports in general, it's one of those things that we have conflict in, that there's rivalry in, but it's in a good sense, right? You want to go out, you want to play, you want to beat down your opponent, you want to say good game, and then afterwards go have a good time with your friends and family and get them again next year if you happen to lose, right? But there's other types of conflict that are sincerely bad. Politics, whether you're Republican, Democrat, Libertarian, or something else, oftentimes brings out the worst in us because we're trying to win our argument, to have our way move forward. And oftentimes, it's just ugly. We look around our landscape today in our country today, you see it happening all the time, from the West Coast to the East Coast, from the Gulf Coast to Canada. There's all kinds of conflict going on, even within our churches. Within God's people. Oftentimes we're in conflict with one another politically. And then we have the idea of men and women, that conflict that comes with that anymore. We're just different in our genders, right? We think differently, we act differently, we look differently. But in our world around us today, there is conflict on what a man is, what a woman is, what kind of rights we have, what kind of rights we don't have. And then as always, you have Hamas and Israel. You have Japan and America, you have Korea, Vietnam and Iraq. You have the inner cities of Chicago. You have New Iberia. You have Austin and Georgetown where war breaks out. There's conflict. When conflict comes hurt and destruction, pain, one side trying to defeat the other, and in reality, nobody ever really wins. Then you got this one. What do you want for Christmas? To be an only child. Some of y'all know what that's about, right? But here's the thing, right? Even in our families, holidays can be a stressful time because the conflict that goes on within our families. Weddings and funerals are like family reunions anymore, right? And they're tense times. They're tense because emotions are high, feelings have been hurt in the past, sibling rivalry, mom always liked you best. But conflict is real. But oftentimes we deal with the symptoms. We can see what's happening around the world on the news. We can see the families that are fighting sometimes, and we deal with the symptoms when we need to be getting to the root cause. Why is Hamas and Israel fighting? Why is Ukraine and Russia fighting? Why is America always on edge? We deal with the symptoms. Why are our families oftentimes falling apart? Why do we sit in auditoriums like this with smiles on our faces but hearts breaking on the inside? Jealous of the people sitting around us who we know have good families, but we don't want them to know that we're struggling, that we're hurting. But we deal with the symptoms far too often and not the root cause. And the root cause is that we live in a world where the evil exists. We live in a world where our battle's not against Hamas, our battle's not against the Republican or the Democrat or the Texas Rangers or the Houston Astros or the Oklahoma Sooners and the Texas Longhorns. Although it might be against the Aggies, I'm not sure. I'm just kidding with you, brother. But our battle is against not flesh and blood, but against the spiritual forces of evil in this dark world and in the heavenly realms. And we forget that far too often. Now, we get it superficially, surface level, a lot of times. And we cry out, why, O Lord? How long, O Lord? Trying to fix the symptoms. Well, if I just get this right, if I just do this right, everything will be good. But the reality is, until we figure out that we're fighting against evil and how evil manipulates you and manipulates me, we're going to struggle. And the conflict's not going to end. Yeah. Many of you know what it's like to be pursued by a roaring lion, seeking whom he may devour. Many of you have experienced that in your families growing up, in your own lives. You've been there when your life has been torn apart because of conflict and the hurt and decisions that you've made. See, Jesus tells us in John 10:10 that the thief came to steal, kill, and destroy. How many of you know people whose families have been stolen from them? Their joy has been stolen. Their lives have been stolen. How many of you know people who have relationships have been killed or destroyed? You don't have to look very far across the landscape to see the results of what evil in this dark world can do, in the conflict between light and dark. You don't have to look very far at all. I know I don't. I can look within my own heart, and I can see the times where I failed miserably, when I made poor decisions, but I can also see where God has delivered me. And I live in a community where the slogan right now is Stop Silence, End Gun Violence. And there's a group over here saying, you're just trying to take our guns. And there's a group over here saying, no, we're tired of 14-year-olds killing each other. And my face was on the billboard. And I had to sit and talk with some good friends of mine saying, this is not about your guns. I'm a gun holder. I like to hunt and fish. But it's about opening your mouth up when you see something happening, letting people know so that something can be done. And far too often we keep our mouths quiet while the lion, the devil, devours us piece by piece, bit by bit, until our hearts are just obliterated. So in New Iberia, I work out at a gym called Dynamic Health Club, and I've been doing that for several years. Back when Scotty was down there, we went to Planet Fitness. And my workout partner and I was doing deadlifts one day. He was doing arms. He was talking about deer hunting in Alabama. That's how we met. And I used to live in Alabama. So he's talking. I said, well, where you hunt? And we got to talking about some things. We developed some friendship. And I would invite him to our men's group on Wednesday nights. He never came. And finally, one day he did. So Adam comes in, and Adam's about my height and about 250 pounds of solid muscle. And he's sitting there. And he's kind of quiet. He's not kind of, he's very quiet. And all these guys are sitting in a circle, and then Randy Reed talks about losing his son. I mentioned him to y'all last time I was here when he was lost at sea. And then another gentleman talked about losing his baby. And another man talked about how his son was on a boat going out to a rig, and it had an explosion. And another man talked about losing his daughter. And all of a sudden, Adam's like, I'm not the only one. You see, Adam walked away from God, the battle he was dealing with in 2004. He was a worship leader at the church he attended years ago. And he was running late one night. He told his daughter and his granddaughter, y'all go ahead and go, I'll catch up. They were in a head-on collision and both were killed. And Adam held that hurt and that pain within himself. And he didn't know what to do with it. He directed it at God. He was angry, he was mad, understandably so. But that was the battle he was fighting. So Adam and I developed a relationship, came more and more close. He comes now, he helps me facilitate things. But what happened is the guys at the gym started asking us questions about God. Because Adam would always come to Wednesday night men's group. And then on Thursday morning, we started asking me questions about our class that we had. And we dialogued, and then people started asking questions, and it grew. And I told Adam, I said, maybe we should start something at your house. Because these people aren't going to come to the church building. Not in New Iberia, Louisiana, anyway. He said, okay, we can do that. First time we had around 12 to 15 guys. The last one we had 30. And it's a consistent 25 to 30 from the gym, restaurant owners, and then people like this, Mike. Mike's the owner of the largest strip joint in the city of Lafayette, Louisiana. Sex trafficking, exploitation of women. See, a lot of different things, right? But here's this man, single man, living in a 5-bedroom house all by himself, who was coming to me privately in the gym asking questions. And now he's coming to Fight Club on Monday nights, and he's bringing his dad. How awesome is that? From the ages about 25 up to the oldest gentleman that comes is 74, and that happens to be Missy's dad, Les. We have engineers, we have pipe rollers, we have restaurant owners, we have strip club owners coming together and talking about what God is doing in our lives. But we call it Fight Club because everybody's fighting something. And the biggest battle begins within ourselves. And it's a place where we can get together and talk about what the roaring lion has been doing. Where we can talk about the bumps and the bruises and the heartaches and the pain. Where people men whose marriages are falling apart can ask other men, what do I do? Where people that are lonely can now have a place they belong. We're all fighting something, and you know as well as I do, the biggest battle more often than not is within ourselves. It's hard for us to ask for help. It's hard for us to be vulnerable. It's hard for us to confess and to repent, but when we do, it's awesome, isn't it? To be lifted up and to share what God is doing in your life. And that's what's happening in Fight Club. That's what's happening in other places. We're acknowledging the fact that life is hard. But we're not sitting around whining about it. We're coming together, iron sharpening iron. And now our women are doing things on Monday night also that my wife has started, getting women together who are also sharing their struggles and their battles. And it's beautiful. I want you to understand that Jesus understands our battle. He understands what it's like to have a roaring lion seeking you who you may devour. He spent 40 days in the wilderness constantly being approached by the evil one. He spent 33 years basically looking to the cross. He was in the garden praying to his father, talking to his dad, saying, if there's any other way, but not my will, but yours. He understands what it's like to have a struggle, an internal battle, when you're being pulled one way and then being pulled another. The Apostle Paul understood it too in Romans chapter 7, 19 through 20. For I do not do the good I want, but the evil I do not want is what I keep on doing. I promise you, well, I'm just going to challenge you. How many men have ever looked at pornography in this room besides me? Who's ever lusted in this room besides me? You see, we could go through the book of Romans. There's all kinds of lists of sins. We're going to look at some in a minute in Galatians. But we struggle as believers. Here's the thing. We're saved, right? God has redeemed us, moved our sin as far as the east is from the west. But one of the biggest battles we fight with is being honest about it. We walk in like, I've never hurt in my life. Oh, I've sinned. But, not too bad. All the while, sin is eating away at us. Because like King David in Psalm 51, we kept it to ourselves. And then finally, someone comes along like Nathan and says, look, you got to talk about this. You got to own up to it. And when we do that, healing comes. But you notice in Psalm 51, when David said, create me a clean heart, O God, you've made me white as snow. He says, my lips will sing your praises. In other words, I'm going to tell people what you redeemed me from. Murder, adultery, lying. He committed some big ones. And Psalm 51 was the song they sang. Imagine having your story being sang in here on Sunday mornings. He owned it. We're going to be in the book of Galatians. We're going to go through this rather quickly, but not too fast, I hope. Most of you know that Galatians is, if Romans is what the gospel should be, Galatians is what the gospel should not be. when you read them, okay? So Galatians chapter 1 through about 5.5, you have Paul dealing with Judaizers and others coming in and trying to say, yeah, Jesus died for us, there's the gospel, that's good news, but it's Jesus plus religion. It's Jesus plus the law of Moses. It's Jesus plus persecution, circumcision. That'd be kind of like persecution, wouldn't it? Yeah. And so he's dealing with this, trying to keep and help them to understand. In fact, he chastises Peter in chapter 2, saying, you used to eat with the Gentiles. You ate with them. You fellowshiped with them. But then when some people from James came over, you withdrew. So now that even Barnabas is being led astray. Peter was battling with acceptance, dealing with persecution, what that might look like. And he's the big Peter, walked on water. Oops, went the wrong way. Back up here. There we go. Paul understands that the evil ones in the book of Galatians trying to steal, kill, and destroy the gospel message. Don't lose that. Jesus died, fulfilled the law, and there's no way that you and I are ever going to earn it, no matter how many times we sit in here, how many songs we sing. And we know that intellectually, but it's hard for our heart to grab hold of that. Because we live in a culture where we get graded by what we do. And when we don't measure up, we get fired, we get let go, we get demoted. But in Christ, you are set free. Not for one time only, but for all time. So Galatians 5:13 and following, we read this. For you were called to freedom, brothers. Only do not use your freedom as an opportunity or a launching point. It's a military term, a launching point for the flesh. Flesh being the sinful nature. But through love, serve one another. For the whole law is fulfilled in one word. You shall love your neighbor as yourself. Back to Leviticus 19. But if you bite and devour one another, watch out that you are not consumed by one another. It's not just the evil one working on us, people outside the kingdom. The evil one can work on us, on each other, by how we interact with one another, how we treat one another. You have this issue. You've got the one hand, they're trying to add the law of Moses. And on the other hand, you got people like, I'm saved, I can do whatever I want to do. And Paul's saying you can't yank God's chain. He's consistent. So what he's trying to say is when two people demand their own rights, the relationship's going to die. Because sooner or later, my right and your right are going to collide. Jesus gave up his rights when he came to earth, and he modeled that for us. Instead, use your freedom to serve one another in love. We've been set free. I have freedom. I can do what I want. What he is saying is, humble yourself and become a slave and serve others. And that's a conflict in our culture today because everybody's about what are my rights? Don't step on my rights. And I get it. But never forget in Matthew chapter 5, when Jesus is saying, love your enemy and pray for those who persecute you and turn the other cheek, he's talking to a Jewish audience who are occupied by Romans who very easily could have taken your brother, your sister, or your mom and did something horrible to them the day before. And he's saying, love them. You may have the right to get even, but I want justice, I want mercy, and I want humility, not revenge. The key ingredient in freedom is love. Love one another. If we're going to exercise our freedom, because here's the thing, we have Sooners, we have Aggies, we have Longhorns, we have people who could care less. We have Dallas Cowboy fans, we got Houston Oilers fans, my team doesn't exist anymore. That stinks. But here's the thing, we bring people together from all walks of life. And one person's faith lets them go all the way over here. Great. The other person's faith makes them stop right about here. They're both following the Lord. The conflict becomes, well, you're wrong. No, you're wrong. How about we're both pursuing God? Let's continue pursuing God together. Let's learn from each other. Let's accept each other where we are. In some ways, Paul would say, become all things to all people, right? To win as many people to God as he can. But it's also, here's the thing. Jesus took the 12 apostles, brought them together. He had a tax collector and a zealot. On any given day, zealot would have killed the tax collector. He showed us how to put and get along, to overcome conflict. And the key to that is love. But I say, walk by the Spirit, and you will not gratify the desires of the flesh, sinful nature. For the desires of the flesh are against the Spirit, and the desires of the Spirit are against the flesh. For these are opposed to each other. Think Paul back in Romans 7. I don't do what I want to do. What I don't want to do, I do. To keep you from doing the things you want to do. They're in opposition. The sinful nature, the Spirit. By show of hands, who has ever struggled with the sinful nature and the Spirit besides me? A few more of you, okay. I would tell you, you don't have to raise your hands, but you need to hear this just in case. If you haven't struggled with the sinful nature and the Spirit, you're either lying or you're dead. Because there's one Jesus, you ain't him, and neither am I. And Jesus himself struggled. But each person is tempted when they are dragged away by what? Their own evil desires. And enticed. Then after desire is conceived, it gives birth to sin, and sin, when it is full grown, gives birth to death. Satan knows what you desire. He's going to put it in front of you in any different way he can. He's got a tackle box with 1,000,001 lures in it. And if he needs more, he'll get them. And he is going to seek you, and he's going to tempt you, not by things you hate, but by things you desire. Things that are good can become something that Satan uses to destroy you and destroy me. So what do you desire? I mean, what do you really desire? You desire for the Longhorns to get into the national championship playoffs? You desire for me to quit talking so we can all go out and eat some Mexican food or barbecue? I'm down for that. I desire for my wife to drive back to Louisiana so I can sleep all the way. But what do you really desire in life? Christmas is coming up. You're making your list. What do you desire? Psalm 37:4, delight yourself in the Lord, and he will give you the desires of your heart. Does that mean, God, I desire a new car, and you're going to give me a brand new Lamborghini tomorrow? No. Here's the cool thing. When I align and when I submit and quit fighting with God, and I want the things that he wants, then I get what I want because I'm doing what he wants. But if you are led by the Spirit, you're not under the law. Now the works of the sinful nature or flesh are evident. Sexual immorality, impurity, sensuality, idolatry, sorcery, enmity, strife, jealousy, fits of anger, rivalries, dissensions, divisions, drunkenness, orgies, and things of the like. Whew. That's a list. You got another list in Colossians. You got one in Romans chapter 1. There's lists all over the place. But the thing about lists is they're not all inclusive. There's more stuff out there, right? And I could dwell on this, but I'm not. Here's why. Because you already know. You know what your struggle is. You know what pulls at you when no one else is paying attention. You know what causes you to shut the door and dim the lights. You know what it is to look around before you do something. You know what it is to look a little too long at her or him. You already know all that. And you already know that God doesn't want you doing that. The evil one takes things that are good and twists them around. See, they promise life, but they end up with a hook in your belly that you can't spit out. But the fruit of the Spirit is love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, self-control. Against such things there is no law. And those who belong to Christ Jesus have crucified the sinful nature with its passions and desires. The more I can align my desires with God's desires, the more at peace I'm going to be. The less the evil one's going to rip pieces off my leg and my arm. If we live by the Spirit, let us also keep in step with the Spirit. The idea of walking. Let us not become conceited, provoking one another, envying one another. Paul would say in Romans chapter 12, verse 3, do not consider, verse 5. I get it mixed up. That's verse 3. Basically, don't think of yourself more high than you ought. Don't get conceited. Don't think you got it all together like you're something special. Walking with the Spirit. Okay, that's a typo. I took the T off because I thought Texas was going to lose yesterday. No, it was a joke. Okay. But those who walk by the Spirit walk in love. Right? They live for God and their fellow man. They live to be sacrificial love for one another. They wake up each day and kind of ask themselves, in this situation, how can I show Christ's love? How can I be that living example? They walk in joy. They demonstrate gladness in what God has done, is doing, and will do. How often do we wake up? That's one thing Adam does now, my workout partner. His life has totally changed since he started doing it. He gets up every day and throughout the day and thanks God for every little blessing, for every big blessing. He's starting to look back now because he's thanking God for the right now. He's seeing what God used to do, and it's given him confidence that God's going to continue to bless his life. Not with things, but with God's presence. How much greater can it be than that, right? Walk in peace. Lives are not defined by worry or anxiety. Whatever is right, whatever is pure, whatever is noble, think on these things. Our anxiety comes from the conflict within us, comes because we quit trusting God. Not on purpose, we love Him. But that sinful nature doubts and struggles. And that's a faith thing. Doesn't mean we're not in God's grace, not in God's mercy, or we're getting kicked out of heaven. But it's an area that as I worry, I realize those are areas of my life that I haven't turned over to trust God with. And so somebody walking in the Spirit learns to trust Him. Somebody walking in patience are known by having a long fuse. In other words, they don't have a short fuse. You know people, been around family, doggone it! You do that again, I've been in elder meetings like that. I've been in family gatherings like that. I've been on football teams like that. The point being, it doesn't matter who you are, there's always going to be somebody that has a short fuse. And that short fuse doesn't mean they don't love God, doesn't mean they're not serving with God, but it does mean they haven't learned to take on this quality of God. And Jesus had every reason in the world to have a short fuse, but He had a long one. Bible tells us He hasn't come back yet. He's not long in coming. And some of us think, why? He's wanting more people to come to know Him. Kindness, showing tenderness and concern for the needs of others. Y'all are great at that. I've heard so many things about how you reach out in your community and you serve others. Casa Esperanza and the Christmas tree back there. But it's not just that, it's your neighbor. It's the person at the store. It's Mr. Harold Madeley who worships with us. He's 87 years old. And this woman who was in a wheelchair shopping cart was going through the aisles, and he saw that she was struggling, and he got some stuff down for her. He thought, he's retired from British Petroleum. He thought, I'm going to pay for this. He had several patents on how to get stuff, fishing tools out and stuff like that. And when he gets up there, she paid for his. He's like, what in the world? But then he paid it forward a week later for somebody else. But it's not just buying things. It's sometimes people need somebody to talk to. Sometimes our wives need us men to be quiet and just listen. And sometimes us men need an attaboy. And all of us need somebody to say, you matter, I see you, you belong. Goodness, the action of their lives reflect the virtue of holiness. There's something about them. You've been around those people, right? There's just something about them that's different. You know what I mean? There's a peace about them. There's the way they speak, the way they talk, the way they act. It's different. Faithfulness, steadfast in their trust of God and His Word. Part of the armor of God is to stand firm in the gospel of peace. Not having feet all nervous, but being firm. Gentleness, whose lives are characterized by humility, grace, and thankfulness to God. We live in a culture that doesn't really honor humility. We see it as a weakness. But it takes great strength to be humble. It takes great strength to give grace to people who you don't think deserve it. But here's a reminder, neither do we. So give what God's given us. Self-control, display moderation, constraint for the ability to say no to the sinful nature. One of the things I've learned, and I want to wrap it up here in a second, whenever I falter and I give in to the sinful nature, it doesn't just happen like this. It's because my attention I see it. And I keep going, and I see it again, and I'm a little bit closer. It's kind of like Psalm 1, right? Blessed is the man who doesn't walk, stand, or sit. It's a progression. But how cool is it to be that one who meditates on God's word day and night? He says you're like a tree planted by the water who produces fruit in season. And Jesus is the living water. And so when someone's producing the fruit of the Spirit, you see someone that's walking with God, who's connected to God. And here's the kicker, and this is the end of it. Your new life is going to cost you your old one. It's an everyday thing. That's why Paul would say, be transformed by the renewing of your mind. Become a living sacrifice. One and done's a lot easier. I mean, I don't want to be in the Colosseum and be burned alive or eaten, or like the apostle Nathaniel, be skinned alive. I don't want that to happen. But sacrificing every day, putting the needs of others ahead of my own every day, humbling myself daily, allowing God to chip away at the marble He doesn't need so that I can be who He needs me to be, who He wants me to be, who He died for me to be, who He died for you and I to be. And who is that? God's prayer and desire is that we be conformed to the image of Christ, His Son. That doesn't happen easy. Your old life's going to cost you. Are you ready to make it? You might be today, tomorrow, or maybe you've already made it. But I want to remind you before we sing the song, it's a decision you got to make every day. 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Because the evil one, never forget that when he tempted Jesus so many times, it said he went away for a more opportune time. We don't know when that opportune time is going to be. But he does, and the Father does. And when I'm walking in step with the Father, drawing near to the Father, Scripture teaches me that the evil one will flee. And if he's not fleeing, it's because I'm not walking in step with the Spirit. The old life's got to go so that you can have your new life as we stand and sing.